This is a very big story today. It is the first step in the fight to overturn President Obama's health care law. 20 states are squaring off against the Justice Department this week, and it is now actually in court as of yesterday. The feds are trying to get this entire case dismissed. The judge said yesterday that that is unlikely to happen. Meanwhile, the latest Rasmussen poll shows that 53% of Americans favor repealing health care reform in this country. Greg Abbott is one of those attorney generals who is involved in this case. He's also running for re-election in Texas. Mr. Abbott, welcome. Good to have you here today.
Good morning, Martha.
Now, based on, the judge said a few things yesterday, and they were sort of on both sides of the fence. Based on what he has said so far, what are you gleaning about his interpretation of all of this and whether or not he thinks health care reform might indeed be unconstitutional?
Well, what we gleaned yesterday was very promising for the future of liberty in this country, for the future of limited government in this country. You know, if you go back 6 months ago when Congress passed this bill and the state attorneys general raised this issue about challenging the health care reform law, Obamacare, they rolled their eyes at us. And when we filed our lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of Obamacare, the Department of Justice once again rolled their eyes at us. But now that we have them in court, they're realizing the gravity of the unconstitutional act that Congress has taken, and that we are holding them accountable to the American people for trespassing on the Constitution. What we gleaned from the hearing yesterday is that this judge understands the Constitution, looks like he's going to apply the Constitution, which is going to limit Congress's authority to impose this individual mandate on Americans across this country. What Congress did is to try to force Americans to go out and purchase health care insurance, which is the first time where Congress is forcing people to do something, and we think the judge is going to rein them in by enforcing the Constitution.
All right, understood. Now, this is just the first hurdle. This is just sort of to see whether or not this case is going to continue. The judge is determining the merits of the case of the 20 states attorney generals and a couple of individuals, and the business organization NFIB is also involved in this case. But it seems to me, looking at the way the case was presented from the government side yesterday, that their argument, and tell me if I'm wrong, is basically greater good. They're saying sooner or later everybody in this country purchases health care. Everybody pays for, health insurance or services at a doctor's office. So having them do it in advance, a question of timing, whether they do it now or later, is not an infringement of their constitutional rights.
Well, it is true that Congress has the authority to achieve the greater good under the General Welfare Clause. Congress didn't pursue legislation under the General Welfare Clause. Instead, they pursued it under the Commerce Clause. And what Congress cannot do is to force Americans into the stream of commerce by making them buy a good or service, which is exactly what they did here. If Congress gets away with this, there would be no limits to congressional authority in forcing Americans to go out and buy anything, which is why this case is so incredibly important.
Yeah, we showed that poll. 53% of Americans say that they're against it. Would like to see a repeal of health care law. It is interesting to note, though, that 3 of the attorneys general who have run on this, in elections, were defeated. Among them, Bill McCollum, who has been very much out in front on this issue. What does that tell us about the people's passion on this, on all of this?
Well, I know in the state of Texas the people's passion is firmly against Obamacare, firmly against the federal government intruding into their lives, telling people what they must purchase. And I think the people of the state of Texas are ready to have Congress's power reined in by the federal courts, enforcing the Constitution, limiting congressional authority and abuses.
Yeah. All right. It's very interesting. And what I'm hearing from you is that it was clear from the judge that he takes this issue very seriously. Also, DOJ is now standing up and taking notice and no longer saying that it's ridiculous to challenge the constitutionality of health care reform, and that you think it's going to make it through this hurdle. Is that right, sir?
Well, the judge indicated that it looked like the judge was going to deny the federal government's motion to dismiss on at least one ground, maybe more than one ground. That gets us past this first hurdle. We go on to the second hurdle, which would be the motions for summary judgment, which is essentially a trial on the merits. We would go from there to the Court of Appeals and on to the Supreme Court. We believe we will be completed with the trial court process by the end of this year and make it up to the United States Supreme Court within about a 2-year time period, which is incredibly fast for the litigation process.
And how fascinating that battle would be. Greg Abbott, Attorney General in Texas, thank you very much, sir. Good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Martha.